So I'm just going to start with the blurb so we can start right on time for everyone. So you are sitting in CTRB 02, Contributed Oral Presentations, Curation and Sustainability theme. So should be some really interesting topics coming up here. So welcome to you all and to everyone online. We've got Terry over here looking after the online folks. Thanks to the team on the side for looking after us. And I'm Shelley James. I'm me. So I'm on the SPNHC and TDWG boards, executive. So thank you, first of all, to all of our wonderful, wonderful sponsors, in particular our diamond sponsors, for all of their support. Hopefully some of you came to their little session at lunchtime today and supported them. But we have many other supporters not also listed on this board, and we'd like to thank them for getting us here in Okinawa and to have such a fabulous conference. So everyone who's online, or even if you're in the room, if you have a question that you'd like to ask, but you don't want to ask it in person, you can put it into the Zoom chat that's running at the moment. But after the conference, or if you think of something else later this evening and you want to desperately ask a speaker, you can put your questions into the Oxford Abstracts appropriate group or direct message somebody. So the on-demand viewing for this session will be available either tomorrow or the next day, thanks to all of our volunteers who are very quickly working on that, but please be patient if it takes us a little bit of time. So for the speakers that we have today, you've got the green, yellow and red. Green, you're going good. Yellow, don't panic, you've got a little bit of time. And red, I'll come and tackle you, okay? So everyone so far has been so good keeping to time, so yes, thank you to everyone for doing that. And if you have a question, we'll ask you to use a microphone, please, so that everyone online can hear you. So we are going to start with Lindsay Nottingham, and she's going to be talking about creating a curatorial framework for the Sternberg Museum of Natural History's Coal Ball collection. So come on up.
Hi, my name is Lindsay Nottingham. I'm currently a second-year master's student in geosciences at Fort Hays State University in Kansas. And this is for my master's project, something I've lovingly dubbed the Coal Ball Conundrum, creating a curatorial framework for the Sternberg Museum of Natural History's coal ball collection. So, what's a coal ball, you ask? This is the old version of my presentation. Yeah, I went up.
I'll be with you in a moment. Sorry.
No worries.
Aha. They're dragging and dropping. It's all good. Does that look better?
Yes.
Yay, go team.
Okay, so I will not go over that little part, but so I've lovingly dubbed my project Coal Ball Conundrum, creating a curatorial framework for the Sternberg Museum of Natural History's coal ball collection. And so, what's a coal ball, you ask? This is a coal ball. Coal balls are concretions of primarily plant material found in some coal seams dating back to the Carboniferous, the geologic period that lasted from 359 million years ago to 299 million years ago. During the Carboniferous, we got some weird stuff, like giant insects, giant millipedes, 8 feet long. So, if that doesn't give you a nightmare, good for you. And this is what a Carboniferous coal swamp environment looked like. These are two different representations, and so all the plants you see here are not flowering plants. They hadn't evolved yet. So you see things that mostly ferns and their relatives, lycophytes, and some early gymnosperms, the group that contains plants like cycads, ginkgos, and conifers. And as the dying plant material fell into the swamp, it got aggregated and compressed into peat and was eventually permineralized, typically by silica. And since they formed prior to the intense heat and pressure of the later stages of coal formation, they preserve anatomical structures of the plants in exceptional detail. However, these specimens are prone to a very common problem found in paleo collections, which is pyrite decay. The official name is pyrite oxidation, but people usually call it pyrite disease or pyrite decay. Coal balls have this in them, and it's caused from when pyrite oxidizes when exposed to oxygen. So we've got some pretty harmful products, including sulfuric acid, which is going to corrode specimen labels, boxes, and is generally not too safe to handle. There's also sulfur dioxide, the pungent gas responsible for the smell of burnt matches, and is also a major component of acid rain, so you don't really want to be breathing that in. And ferrous sulfate, it's not toxic, but it occupies a greater area than the original pyrite, so that expands the specimen and causes cracking. And so the pyrite itself has to be exposed to the air to react with this. So the less surface area exposed, the better. But since, as I mentioned, once pyrite decay started, it causes cracking that increases the surface area, causing a feedback loop. And this mechanism also suggests that a dry, enclosed environment without oxygen inflow would be ideal to prevent and reduce pyrite oxidation. But different collections have shown different reactions, showing that all collections are going to have different progressions of decay. And since coal balls have a high incidence of pyrite decay, my co-authors worked to develop this system for rapid pyrite decay classification. This rapid system for classifying pyrite decay in coal balls takes the progression of pyrite decay and quantifies it into 6 distinct stages with their own criteria. It allows you to quickly assess your collection and put specimens in distinct categories based on their decay progression. It's primarily a classification system. Some curatorial suggestions have been developed, which I have not shown, but are not institution specific. And so I come into the picture where I learned about their system, and with my pre-existing interest in pyrite and pyrite decay in fossils, I got into talks with them about applying and adapting it to the smaller collection at my institution, which leads us to the Sternberg Museum of Natural History. Located in Hays, Kansas, just off I-70, it's easily recognizable by its huge dome. If you want the story of the dome, talk to me after the talk. It's a pretty interesting story. And so at the Sternberg, we've got a wide array of collections, but we're perhaps most known for our collection of Western Interior Seaway fossils. The paleobotany collection, however, is a collection that's fallen victim to a common plague to museums. So many specimens, not enough resources. And therefore it's been mostly under-maintained for the better part of 30 years. And me, being the naive, eager incoming master's student I was last year, I saw this and said, this should be a fun project. Needless to say, I had no idea what I was getting into. This is what it looked like when I got there. As you can see, there are haphazardly piled specimens, which means specimens are hard to access, likely unorganized, and can come into contact with each other, which can damage the specimens. We've also got cardboard boxes in collections, not archival quality. They don't allow for organization of individual specimens. They likely have writing that's not relevant to what's in there on them, and they can be a breeding ground for pests and moisture retention. Also, from here, the specimens maybe have labels, it's not clear, and there's no obvious sign of any documentation. And in fact, a few weeks after this first assessment, when I thought it was just these 2 drawers, I ended up finding 2 more cardboard boxes and 3 metal drums of additional specimens. And so, before we look at those potential labels, we should look at what I'm going to be looking for when I'm looking at those labels. And so, the most important information associated with the specimen is going to be the locality. It gives you an idea of perhaps what you could find there and how old the strata is, and that's no different for coal balls. Certain taxa can only be found in certain coal seams, and so you want a locality that will tell you that information. And so going back to those potential labels, we get this. The majority of the specimens are unlabeled, and those that are only have an imprecise location and no specimen number. And so we see some of these have location. So we've got locality, that should be good. Not so fast. Most of them are labeled Illinois. And coal balls from the Carboniferous are found around a large portion of Illinois. So just saying they're from Illinois isn't very helpful. And also, while there are some localities from Kansas and some coal balls labeled that, they're on the other side of the state, and no one at the institution has any idea of what's going on in the history of these specimens. And so then I eventually found this box of cellulose acetate peels, which are a part of the extended specimen of a coal ball. It was unlabeled and hidden in a random cabinet in collections, not stored anywhere near the specimens. There was no system of organization, many were unlabeled or minimally labeled, and it's unclear whether they even corresponded to the physical specimens we had in those drawers. And then, so what I did was I developed a curatorial framework, and I adapted the rapid classification to the Sternberg collection. And this is a quick example of what's involved. By using that rapid system as the foundation for mine, I have a solid basis for classifying things. And after preliminary application of the rapid system, I found myself putting a lot of specimens in the middle of 2 levels, which led me to expand the classification system to have over 10 levels, going from 0 to 5 on 0.5 intervals. And this allows me to have a system that's more tailored to the Sternberg collection's levels of decay. Then, with the goal of figuring out what on earth to do with these specimens, I got to developing a curatorial framework centered on those levels of decay. And with locality being a key piece of information for a specimen, I divided the framework into 2 branches, specimens with locality and without. And anything beyond minor cracks in a specimen means that you can't take a peel without risking that specimen completely fall apart. And those are the primary method of analyzing coal balls. But they can be done on fragments as small as a square centimeter, so even if it's already fallen apart, if you have small pieces that are in good condition, you can still take peels, even though they may only be of small structures. Other things I took into consideration when creating my protocol were the amount of space we had in collections, the budget we have for dealing with these, how likely it is that someone else is going to come in and work on these, and the value of the degraded specimens to the collection. And so after creating this curatorial framework, I'm going into this year looking to actually apply it. This involves fully matching all the peels and specimens to one another, figuring out what slabs actually go with each other. Some slabs, I've got 4 and they clearly come from the same thing, but I also have this box of peels, and it's like I have to kind of play a big game of a big puzzle where I have to match everything to one another. And then I need to evaluate the decay level and then go through the curatorial framework and work on rehousing specimens, taking peels so that even if I can't identify what taxa they are, someone else can, and then laying out the steps for specimen longevity and what people coming after me can do, especially if I don't get the chance to fully implement my framework. And that involves leaving notes for future museum staff and recording the decay progression as it is now, so people can revisit it at later points and see if things have gotten worse. And so I'd like to thank all of you, and especially my co-authors, my committee, my university museum, as well as other people who contributed to information in this presentation, such as the people who worked on coal balls at other institutions, people who work on the different methods used to analyze them, and the grant from both SPNHC and my university for helping to fund this project. And wrong button. If you have any questions, I'm happy to hear it, and you can scan that QR code and it'll take you to the table with the full protocol.
Thanks, Lindsay. That was great. Any questions?
Hi. You talked about taking peels. How are you going to do that? What are you going to use for taking peels?
So peels are typically done by etching them in hydrochloric acid and then applying a cellulose nitrate or cellulose acetate film on top and then peeling it off. I still need to practice that, and so there are some degraded specimens without locality that I plan on using to practice that would otherwise be deaccessioned.
I have a follow-up question. First of all, did you know that cellulose nitrate explodes? And second, that both cellulose nitrate and cellulose acetate degrade terribly in collections, as you probably can see in the peels that you already have. So have you considered using something else instead of the techniques of cellulose acetate and nitrate for peels?
I've looked into that, but the main way of analyzing coal balls without taking peels is either through thin section, which is going to be more destructive, or CT, which is something my institution most certainly cannot afford. And so I've also looked into getting a cold storage unit because according to the National Park Service says that it's a good way to store cellulose acetate and cellulose nitrate films for longer term storage.
Okay, all right, but maybe we can chat later.
All right, well, we are about out of time, so let's thank Lindsay again for her fantastic talk. And next up, we have Laura, and she's going to be talking about the malacology collection at the American Museum of Natural History, AMNH. God, I can't speak anymore. Challenges and successes.
Thank you. Okay, so hello, my name is Laura Rincon Rodriguez, and I'm going to talk about the malacology collection, and I work there as a museum specialist. So the malacology collection was established in 1874 with the J Private Collection. We have dry specimens organized by phylogenetic order and with the specimens organized by class within cabinet range. The red numbers are the different buildings that we have in the museum. And this is important to highlight where we have the collections because the collection is across different buildings and floors. So here's how the space looks for the dry specimens. You can see your cabinets and how I access to the specimens. We have most of them in the hallway, in the closet. So the malacology staff is Dr. Jessica Goodhart. She is the assistant curator and professor since 2022. She's from California, and it's me, museum specialist since last year, and I was born and raised in Colombia. So how did we start? The backstory about this collection is there were not full-time staff hired 16 years ago. So the last curator was Dr. Paula. She finished in 2006 with her museum specialist, Marla Coppolino, in 2006 as well. So we have a lot of work to keep up. So I started doing a collection assessment of the collection and trying to decide our top priorities. And then I have been trained by Lily Berniker. She is the Marine Senior Museum Specialist, and she has been helping me with the transition in my position. So since there is a lot of information to keep in mind, I started writing our documentation, which is something super important for the collections because many collection staff stay there 30 years left and all the knowledge is gone with them. So this is very important. I started doing the documents about how to do the packing specimens, how to do the accessions. Also, we have a collections procedures document writing in 2001, and that's something that I would like to update it. Also, we have a document where we keep the projects that we are currently working on. And something that I'm currently working is this new spreadsheet with the families and locations, because every time a researcher sends me an email, I need to look for the specimens, and sometimes they are misplaced, or the family is in the cabinet but not in the inventory. So this is an ongoing work. Also, I have researched and read the previous work done by the staff. So we draft a collections plan, which will allow us to set our goals and action steps for the next 5 years. Some of my colleagues from the Invertebrate Zoology department read together this book, the AAM Guide to Collections Planning. And this book is very helpful because you will have all the sections about how to create a plan. But for now, I'm gonna focus in the short-term and long-term priorities. So in our short-term priorities, we have the replacement of ethanol, leads, and jars as needed in the wet collection. We wanna do appropriate seals for historical jars and the management of outstanding loans. And in the long-term priorities, we wanna transfer vulnerable dry collections. So in December, we are getting new seeds cabinets, and we also want to have better climate control. And I have installed some data loggers where they were not before. And also we want to teamwork to create our updated shared policies and procedures and import and clean data from a FileMaker. And now we migrated to EMU. And we want to fully catalog and database new accessions, including digitization of new types. We also want to provide paid internships for interdisciplinary group students as museum studies and information and library science students. So last year, I had my first museum studies intern, and she helped me to went through outstanding loans. She reviewed 120 starting from 1992, and she was able to close 30 loans. Also, I had my first volunteer this year. She's a museum studies student as well, and she helped me to update an inventory of a section in the collection. We also want to connect and collaborate with other collections in our museum and in the different malacology collections close to New York. And in January, I'm gonna start my teaching assistant position at the New York University. They have the museum studies program. So I would like to teach in the collections management class so we can open more the field for museum studies who want to be in natural history museums. As we spend more time getting familiar with the collection, we encounter more work we need to do. So the collections plan and the project management tool that we use in teams have helped us to keep our priorities in top. So in the wet collection, here is where all the invertebrate zoology department has the wet specimens. We have 39 cabinets. The specimens are preserved in 75 and 95 of ethanol. We replace as needed the lids from bakelite to polypropylene, bale top to a screw top, and also if the label is not, you can understand, we print out new labels in spoon boon polyester. So I have been putting all this information in EMU, but some of the specimens are not cataloged. So I create a different spreadsheet with those specimens and putting all this information, and also another spreadsheet for the dry out. So I start working with our science conservator, Julia Sivalski. And after going through the literature and consulting different specialists, Fabian, Julian, and John, we came out with using EPDM rubber for the metallic screw lids and the Alcidol for glass stopper lids. Also, we have other jars without Alcidol. And so we will see how this goes. For my learnings and expectations, I'm very glad in my position, and also I'm happy to bring something new in the field with my background. I am a librarian, and I did my master's in museum studies. Also, I want to bring my experience as a Spanish native speaker. I'm new in the culture. I have been in the US for 4 years. So I have my first field trip in Scotland. We collaborated with another university. So it was nice to me to see the collecting even starting from the sea, no? Because when we are in the collection, we only receive the dead animals from the curator, and that's it. So it was nice to have this experience. Also, I have offered collections tours in Spanish. We also want to work in a poster available to the people in Spanish and English. And also, this is the project that I start working in during my master's. And I feel that with those aspects is how we can move forward the collections towards the 21st century practices. So I call active collections, and this is inspired in a book called Active Collections. This was writing for arts and history museums, but I took some of their ideas and I transferred to scientific collections and also with my experience. So I would like to publish and continue working and developing this more during my professional career. Thank you so much. And please hire a museum studies professional in your collection.
Wise advice. Thank you. We do have one question online.
Okay, yes, that's Leonard Lenuk. Sorry if I mispronounce your name. Are you also dealing with risk assessments, and what do you do to lower the risks in collection, especially in wet collection that is highly flammable?
That's so in the department we have one collections manager for the whole department that oversees all the collection. So she's the person who help us with that. But I don't know too much about how we are dealing now with the risk assessment. I'm now just focusing replacing the materials. Yeah.
We do have time for one more question. Excellent.
Yeah, and I mean, probably suggesting more work here, but are you planning ever to digitize this collection and put it online so that everyone can see it and find it?
Yep. Yeah, of course. Yep. That's the idea. That's one of the goals that we have. Yep. And we are two people, but yeah, we hope to be there one day.
Okay, we don't have any more questions online, so thank you, Laura.
Thank you.
Marvellous talk. Okay, we just wait for just 1 minute or two to get us on time to make sure that there's no desperate people wanting to run from another room to here. This is where I need to get up and do a little comedy routine, I guess. Should have remembered all my dad jokes. Sorry. Yeah, I could get up and do a bit of hula or something for you all. Okay. Well, our next speaker is Pamela Horsley. She's in the front row, and she's going to be speaking about a dry collection talk, revitalising the San Diego Natural History Museum marine invertebrate collection, and she's asked that this be a video. So, time for some TV. Okay, thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm really pleased to be speaking with you today about this collection revitalization project. It's been a bit of a challenge for us as I'm an entomologist and my colleagues and co-authors, Kessler Randall and Christiana Mojica, are a paleontologist and a data and project manager, respectively. Thankfully, we've been under the wise direction of a more knowledgeable advisory committee of marine invertebrate zoologists, some of who are listed on the slide here. So today I'll introduce you to the project and talk about how we were able to digitize the collection. Then I'll go over some statistics we've been able to retrieve from the resulting data set, and I'll then share some physical improvements to the collection, talk about our project achievements, and give some advice for those of you that may plan to conduct something similar in the future. So the San Diego Natural History Museum's malacology collection was among the first collections started at the museum. It dates to the founding of the San Diego Society of Natural History in 1874 and consists primarily of gastropods and bivalves. They fill about 100 steel lane-style geological cabinets, and the collection is estimated to contain about 5 million specimens between the dry collection I'm speaking of today and the ethanol preserved collection we just obtained further funding for from IMLS last week. This includes 135 holotypes and 856 paratypes. Throughout its long history, the collection has grown due to a few notable collectors like Kate Stevens, Fred Baker, and Emery Chase. Unfortunately, over the past 30 years, the collection has been without paid staff, and all taxonomic and organizational work has been done by only a couple of dedicated volunteers. Specimen retrieval in this large collection has been difficult, with only a genus-level drawer inventory existing, with genera and species spread over multiple non-adjacent cabinets. So 3 years ago, the museum received funding through the Institute of Museum and Library Services to revitalize this unique and underutilized collection by improving its accessibility, condition, and management. Our goals are to digitize the paper card catalog, clean the digitized data, and share it via Invert eBase, an online symbiota database, and also to improve the physical condition of the specimens. Another hope of the project is to downsize the collection in order to reduce the storage footprint and prioritize specimens relevant to our museum's regional research mission. So we used optical character recognition, OCR, for the initial transcription of our catalog cards. This resulted in 3 main challenges for the final product. One, the obvious. There were OCR transcription errors, where the OCR couldn't process handwritten text, crossed out text, faint ink, etc. The second was there were formatting errors. So although the OCR was able to parse some of the data, it was not always formatted or fully parsed to Invert eBase standards. And then third, some of the OCR fields had missing data. There were data on the card, but the OCR missed it. Data correction was done initially through bulk cleaning by using various formulas and tools in Excel. Further errors were certain given these results and therefore required manual review, which has been completed by the help of a team of trained volunteers, all of whom operate remotely. In order to minimize the manual data checking work for volunteers, some fields were selected for cleaning and standardization through bulk updates. The main fields we focused on bulk updates in Excel were on contributors, notes, geography, and taxonomy. So people or contributors associated with the collection include collectors, identifiers, and donors. This data was assembled from various places on the catalog cards, including the notes or remarks fields. This field often contains various data, including collector, donor, donation, date, and miscellaneous information. The contributor data were cleaned, standardized, and a collector key was developed to maintain consistency and improve retrievability by Christiana, our project manager. So for the notes field, Christiana was able to use Excel at times to parse out the data into their appropriate database fields. So in this example, OCR produced the string that you can see on the screen there. And Excel was able to parse out the data into 3 fields. So count at 14, life stage juvenile, and verbatim depth at 8 fathoms. So here we see a selection of the cleaned field notes with both usable and unusable parse data, with the usable data mostly in the form of donor information. And then for nonsensical or non-searchable pieces, these were left in the notes for manual review by virtual volunteers when it was uploaded to Invert eBase. So locality data on catalog cards was always presented as a single string with varying amounts of higher geographic data like country and state. The OCR data was searched for keywords, keywords of interest to create keys to add higher geography to records. The locality strings not picked up by one of these keyword searches, they were evaluated at the end and assigned higher geography when possible. Here we see examples of data with higher geography assigned through bulk cleaning on the left, and then locality data that required volunteers to investigate seen on the right. So scientific names required bulk cleaning to reformat them so they could connect in Invert eBase's taxon tree. Examples of this included removing the subgenus and authors' names and dates. We retained the whole original name as an identification remark to not lose any information though. We also started a scientific name glossary that compares our clean scientific name list to the Invert eBase taxon tree, which produces many invalid names, of course. The glossary is used by volunteers for databasing, and invalid names are researched to identify the current name, yet there's still many invalid names left unresolved. So our dedicated project manager, Christiana, developed a very detailed digitization protocol as a living document that volunteers use for data entry and transcription checking. In addition, glossaries and additional resources connected to the protocol allow trained volunteers to work efficiently and entirely independently. Here's an example of one section from the protocol manual comparing one of the several catalog cards and how the data corresponds to Invert eBase fields. You can see how the locality line on the card can potentially be parsed into at least 3 locality fields. Christiana would set up various test sets of data to assess a volunteer's ability for the project. Often data subsets didn't include full records. They could be given to volunteers that might get overwhelmed by the multitude of fields and the formatting requirements for the whole record. So for example, volunteers could just work on locality data only sets, and these sets could be tailored to the volunteer's geographic area of expertise. So under the direction of Christiana, we feel our volunteer team has been quite productive. In about 2 years, 92,000 records have been processed by a team of 20 volunteers. Many volunteers carried it over from a Lepidoptera digitization project that Christiana also managed. So they were familiar with this type of data management and transcription work. But with over 515 unique families and over 26,000 scientific names manually reviewed in WORMS, for validity, often the volunteers couldn't resolve the issue and records have to be flagged as needed expert review, which Christiana would then check over. Although a large percentage of these records were not identified to species, many were identified to higher taxonomic name or the determination was just blank. I'll address how we resolve these blank determinations in a future slide. So digitization has, of course, allowed for a better understanding of our collection and the quality of its associated data. We found a wide range of quality for several scientifically relevant fields. About approximately 20% of the records were missing a species name, yet we learned determinations were able to be retrieved by working with specimens in the collection. Unfortunately, only about 30% of the collection had date data. We've been starting to improve this data weakness by adding collector date bands based on their birth and death dates and adding this to the data set. By doing these date bands, we're hoping this data might be used by researchers for certain kinds of studies. However, as we only have collectors for 50% of our records, we'll be limited to this number for the number of date bands that can be added. Lastly, we have a high number of records with some locality information. For example, only 5% have country information and include very general data like Pacific Ocean, while 16% of the records have only country level information. So once all the locality records were reviewed, we're able to produce this tree map to graphically show the relative proportion of localities based on the number of species lots. We have specimens from every state in the United States and from nearly every country in the world. So the collection spread is very shallow. However, the mean number of records per country being only 29. On the left side of the graphic, surrounded by the dotted line, are the records within the United States. So we see the states with the highest number of species lots are California, Florida, and Hawaii. The red border indicates the 10 countries with the most records, including records with no country locality, and those are at the bottom with blank records. We've stored the largest collections that are outside the museum's research region, and they have been prioritized for deaccessioning. So we improved the physical storage of specimens by first retrieving the approximately 600 species lots of no data specimens. These specimens have no information for collector, date collected, or collecting location, but they did have a determination, so they could be found in the collection. This activity relieved a small portion of the overcrowding of specimens in the collection, and we've made them available for our exhibits and education teams. This task also gave us a practical opportunity to see how long specimen retrieval would take. And with the previous genus level locator inventory and arrangement of drawers, retrieval was very slow. It took about 5 minutes per specimen. So this turned out to be a critical accessibility issue and bottleneck for deaccessioning portions of the collection. The priority now is to reduce the retrieval time through an updated locator inventory and updating the drawer organization. A good example would be for the collection of Australia, with about 4,200 lots. Retrieval was estimated to take about 345 hours. So for a volunteer working 8 hours a week, this would mean almost 11 months of work. So other physical improvements included replacing the in-drawer species name labels that we call flags. Many flags had outdated species names and were handwritten, so new updated flags were printed. Species were consolidated from various drawers and cabinets throughout the collection, and species were organized alphabetically by family. Vial orientation was standardized and included easy-to-read vials. A new species level locator was created, which is a huge improvement over the genus level locator, and all of this work significantly reduces the amount of time it takes to locate a species lot. Approximately 20% of the catalog cards, now the database species lot records, lack scientific names in the database. But for a majority of these specimens, the determination exists either as a handwritten name on the in-drawer collection card, or the card is unlabeled but is within an identified species grouping in the drawer. One of the volunteer projects was to look in drawers for missing species lot names and correct the determination in the database. So in this example for Drupa ricinus, we see some examples of how the determination database record was completed. We have examples of both handwritten identifications and identifications assumed based on species groupings. So thousands of specimens have been updated through this process already, allowing them to now also be discovered digitally. Although this has been a challenging project and we had some important lessons learned. There were a great number of successes that we're proud of. Externally, the biggest success is having a digitized collection that's being synced and accessed via global aggregators like GBIF and being cited in research. This has led to an increase in email correspondence, image requests, and research visits. Internally, the most notable success is the production of a species level locator, which is significantly decreasing retrieval time and making our lives less aggravating. Lessons learned. There are many, but these are some of the main ones. So after the OCR process, we realized there were a number of issues with false negatives and other machine transcription errors. This resulted in a large amount of bulk editing and manual review by staff and volunteers. We're incredibly thankful this project included funding for a designated project manager, as other staff included in the project, myself included, have full-time responsibilities for numerous other department activities, and it leaves little time for the attention required for a 2+ grant project. So this is a major recommendation. Downsizing the collection by about 1/3, as was intended at the beginning of the project, has not been possible due to the underestimation of retrieval time, and will now be an ongoing post-project activity. So other next steps for the collection include dedicating more internal support for the collection in order to address the increase in usage. We're hopeful this will include a permanent part-time staff member, but at a minimum, assistance by other department collection staff is certain. This will result in the ability to continue the curatorial work and oversee volunteers who will continue to utilize the protocols developed during this grant. We invite you to search our collection database using the QR code here or by searching our collection on Invert eBase. And as we continue to refine our deaccessioning strategy to decrease the collection footprint, if you'd be interested in any particular out-of-region specimens that would be better used by your institution, I'd love to discuss that with you. And of course, please don't hesitate to get in touch with us regarding research visits, data, or image requests. So the success of this project would not have been possible without the generous funding provided by IMLS, as well as the members of our advisory committee and the institutions they represent. Thank you to them, and thank you for your attention this afternoon. I look forward to answering any questions.
Thank you, Pam. Unfortunately, we are about out of time. If anyone has one really, really quick question, we can have that, and we have one. Okay.
I just want to know about where the data for the date bands goes, and if that's going directly into Evert yeah.
It's going into Invert eBase, and it'll go into a verbatim date, I think,
Okay.
with a note.
Okay,
Like
that's what I was
Christiana
wondering.
is super, super thorough about this stuff
Okay.
and does everything in notes.
Okay, I'm going to check it out and see how you do.
Okay.
Thanks.
Perfect. Thank you, Pam. All right. So we have the next speaker, Jisoo Kim, who's going to be talking about the introduction of freshwater organism specimen storage at, oh gosh, I'm going to say this completely wrong, Nakdong-gung National Institute of Biological Resources, Republic of Korea, and I do apologize if I butchered that. Take it away.
Hello everyone, my name is Jisoo Kim. I'm associate researcher at Nakdong-gung National Institute of Biological Resources, or NNIBR, from South Korea. And first of all, it's an honor to be here today and have the opportunity to present this topic to you all. And let's begin with this topic. The NNIBR is a public institution founded by Ministry of Environment in 2015. And the main purpose is contribute to preserving biodiversity and promoting the sustainable use of bioresources with a specialization in freshwater biology research. And the following missions are national assetization, conservation, utilization and exhibitions and education of freshwater biological resources. So this is the achievement of NNIBR in numbers since 2015. So we discovered around 2,300 species new to science and new record to Korea. And we've acquired and managed around 540,000 biological specimens and other indices or what we have accomplished since now. And NNIBR has 7 types of biological specimen storages organized by taxons such as animals, plants, and microorganisms, and preservation methods such as wet, dry, and freezing. And a consistent environment of around 18 to 20 degrees with humidity below than 50% is maintained to ensure the safe management for the specimens. And with a special fire suppression systems and UV detection, UV protection lights as well. Since 2015, we have acquired around 540,000 specimens from the 11,000 species, and all of the specimens metadata is registered and maintained in our system called Freshwater Biodiversity Information Portal. So we can use on the website and check and we can download by Excel files, and we can manage. And since 2019, we have been producing the digital images focused on freshwater organism specimens when we established digitizing studios in each storages. So, as you know, normally freshwater specimens are preserved in liquid and small in size. So, and equipment and technologies emphasize like 2D multifocus images and 3D CT images. So this is the just brief represents how we get the multifocus 2D images. So we set the so we make a lot of unifocus images and combine to this high resolution multifocus images, and we can find differences from the before and after stacking images. And all 2D images are we try to capture as high resolution multifocal images, and we have been producing 3,400 specimens from the 930 species. And we have a priorities for the strategy of digitization, and we give the priorities to important species such as type specimens and endangered and endemic species in Korea, and species need to further research. And species with at those at risk with rapid morphological deterioration, such as color fading during the specimen preparation. So they have priorities as well. So red labels means endangered species, and orange labels means endemic species in Korea. And this is the workflow of X-ray CT 3D video image acquisition. So we need to pre-processing before the scan to specimens. Actually, most of specimens is preserved in ethanol, but X-ray cannot penetrate the ethanol as well. So the results would be very blurred and opaque. So we necessarily do the pre-processing the specimens, and then we can put in this CT scan machine, and we can get 1,000 of 2D cross-sectional area images, and go through this volumetric reconstruction and remove some noises from the 2D images, and we can get rendered 3D images like this. And we can put a color on it like this, and we can detect these outer and inner structures, such as organ, muscles, bones, and etc. And this is one of the example of the species of endangered and endemic species in Korea. And this 3D skeletal video was created using the holotype specimen of this species. So we can check the bone structure of this holotype specimen without the destructive method like dissection. And this is one of Amphipoda species we call the blind cave shrimp. It lives in caves. And this specimen of actual size is only 1 centimeter in length, but we can get a precise 3D images and external and internal structure. And these are one of fly larvae. And the body is very soft and delicate, so it's difficult to maintain its original form. So after pre-processing, we can get the digitally preserved both the internal and external structures. Yes, and I now shows the how to utilize the digital images what we've got, and linking the 2D images and 3D images is allowed, or at the same specimen is allows for the we can get the both internal and external structures for the same specimen. So this approach is used to conservation of endangered species and the study of revising the classification systems. And also we can use for the creation of the online field guide of the dragonflies of Korea. And the center one is our endemic species in Korea. And we can provide close-up images, the part of this specimen. So we just ongoing this project. And not only to the utilizations of the research field, and we can make the exhibition contents related to biodiversity, like online exhibition, and utilize a 2D or 3D image the exhibition. And also we can creation of the educational and promotional part. So we can use the SNS and we can promote how we do it and what we have, and make some educational poster and some materials for the teaching. And we just since last year we just start to sharing our digital images to the public, and so far around 1,000 digital images uploaded on our website. So anyone can get these images and using for any purpose. So it includes many species that are not searchable online, or key species like endangered and endemic species in Korea. Also, we can provide 3D digital images just for capturing the video. Anyone wants the original one, we can provide the high like big size, the original video. So we are protecting the national biological assets through the systematic and safe preservation of biological specimens, and supporting to research, exhibition, education, and promotion using freshwater organism specimens and digital images, and raising the public awareness of the importance of freshwater biological resources. So the direction we want to move to forward in the strengthening the role of a specialized freshwater organism research institute and sustainable use through the 100% digital transformation of our collection specimens. And thanks to my colleagues of our institute, and thank you for your attention.
Fantastic, wonderful images, great resource, yeah. Has anyone got any questions for Jisoo? We've got 1 minute. Nobody online? Anybody online? Nope. All right. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Great talk. Okay. So up next we have Charles Cook, speaking on the global biodata infrastructure and the drive for sustainability. take it away.
Right. Thanks for having me. This talk will be a bit of a divergence from the previous ones. And I'm sad to say that I have no pictures of beautiful organisms or even horrifying organisms. So I'm going to talk today about biological data resources. I'll explain what they are, and the global infrastructure and the challenges of sustaining that infrastructure. There's a bit of an introduction. I'm going to go through it fast, but try to speak slowly. And then the sustainability information is at the end, and I'll try to slow down a bit there and go over that in more detail. So what is a biodata resource? And I won't read every slide, but biodata resources are databases that store information generated by life sciences research. And the one that almost everyone will be familiar with are those that store DNA sequence information like GenBank, the European Nucleotide Archive, and TDWG. But there are many, many, many more. We've got a criterion here for how we define them, but there are, of course, other ways to define them as well. Generally speaking, they store either research data or added value analysis of those research data. For instance, the DNA Sequence Archive stores raw DNA sequences, but there are other archives that store genomes, which are processed DNA sequences with annotations. There are many, many data types. This particular diagram comes from the European Bioinformatics Institute, which tends to have a lot of molecular types of data. But of course, museum databases and databases from biodiversity are also included in this. I don't think we would include, say, a database of geological samples from a museum in what we look at, which we call biodata resources, but there are, of course, other kinds of data resources. A little bit of a sidetrack here to talk about infrastructures. On the left, you see a diagram of CERN, the high energy physics facility in Switzerland and France. That's more typically what we think of as an infrastructure. Everything in that diagram is a physically built structure. That's steel, that's concrete, superconductors and magnets and people and railroad tracks. The life science data infrastructure, the biodata infrastructure, which we've diagrammed on the right, is not physical. It's distributed around the world. There are thousands of data resources. Each data resource is stored in some sort of computational system. Could be on the cloud, could be in a university, could be in someone's basement. The people who run the data resource might all be physically together in an office. They might be remote. They might be in 2 different or 3 different or many different institutions. So it's very distributed. Because of the distributed nature of the infrastructure, first of all, not everyone even thinks of it as an infrastructure. And second of all, it's difficult to support it because it has hundreds or thousands of different funding sources and employees, and they're in many different countries. And that's actually what I'm talking about here, is how do we support this infrastructure and make sure that it doesn't suffer, that things don't start to go away. Here's the overview of the infrastructure. The infrastructure is crucial. Those of you working in museums and in biodiversity, people who work in wet labs, everyone is using data resources to do something, doing DNA sequences, doing comparative biology, doing morphology, whatever. Every single life scientist, okay, I'm sure you could find someone who isn't, but virtually every single life scientist is using these data resources daily for his or her work. As I just said, it's distributed, and there's increasing opportunity here. The infrastructure is more and more connected. People are using more and more of these, and the data resources themselves are connected to each other. They talk to each other. For instance, the data resource that stores protein sequence information called UniProt gets much of its information from the DNA sequence database and generates the protein sequences by translating the DNA. So that's one example of how data resources talk to each other. But in fact, almost every data resource talks to almost every other data resource. And this sharing among the resources is what makes it an infrastructure and not just a bunch of different databases. There are a lot of challenges for the infrastructure. The demand is increasing both because more data are being produced, because funders require scientists to put their research data into public databases, and because new technologies are coming up with new kinds of data resources, and these come into the infrastructure. And the challenge for sustainability, which is what the global biodata focuses on, and I'll talk about that in a minute, is that many, well, most, in fact, of these resources, and we've heard this over the past few days here, are not funded as infrastructure. And what I mean by that is that infrastructure, for instance, the roads, the electricity lines, you don't expect the government to fund the road for 3 years and then say, well, 3 years from now, you got to reapply for money. Otherwise, we might not just pay any attention to the roads anymore. We'll just let them fall apart. So that's effectively what's happening to most of the biodata resources, is that they are funded on short-term grants, and every 3 or 5 years or whatever, they have to reapply for funding, even though by the nature of what it's doing, it should be funded continuously, because there's a continuous need for these resources from the scientific community. So this problem has been recognized for some time. I won't talk about the chart on the right for time reasons, but it shows that the funding is limited for most of these resources, and if they don't continually renew grant funding, they will run out of money quickly. So the Global Biodata Coalition was started by funders of data resources. This is NSF, NIH in the US, BBSRC in the UK, and a number of others around the world, which I'll show in the next slide. Because even though they're funding it, they recognize this problem of the short-term, the challenge of funding on short-term. And the reason for that is that most of the funders, some of them are charities, but most of them are government funding. They can't promise to give anyone money for long-term because their own budgets are only guaranteed for a year or two. So that's the challenge that we're trying to solve. I've removed the slide showing who our members are, but you can look them up. So we've done a couple of things initially to help understand the biodata resource infrastructure. We undertook an inventory of biodata resources. This was a machine learning project where we looked at the literature, and we identified publications that described data resources and generated a list of them. So we had about 3,000 originally. We reran this analysis this year and got almost 3,800. This is a minimal number for the number of biodata resources that are in existence. The reason it's a minimal number is that anything that hasn't published a paper describing itself, we won't find. The database, the literature database we used, of course, can't possibly cover every journal ever published. But at the same time, this is a good first step in helping to describe the infrastructure. So this is many resources. They are funded mostly by the big science countries that have big scientific efforts, which is North America, Europe, China, Japan, India. The authors of the the authors of the papers, which are who, in other words, the managers of the data resources, the people who put them together, have a slightly larger distribution. But if you look at both of these maps together, there are still many countries which are not represented as having either a data resource or authors who contribute to, or managers who contribute to generating data resources. So this is another challenge. We'd like to get more of the global researchers involved in generating and producing data resources and funding them. At the other side, so that was thousands of resources. We're also interested in identifying those resources which are most crucial to the infrastructure. In other words, they're used by a very large number of scientists. They have very, very high usage rates, and there any loss of those resources, which we call global core biodata resources, would be really bad for the infrastructure. So we've run 2 selection rounds to select these things, and this is an independent round. We have an independent body of reviewers. I won't describe the process. It's documented. And we've come up with a list of 52 global core biodata resources, which is not exhaustive, but it's a starting point. So we can say there are at least 50 really, really important resources out there in the world, and we'll continue to run 1 additional rounds of this and identify a few more. And again, they're scattered around, but if you look at the map, which is quite small, I realize most of them are in North America and Europe and East Asia. So what I really want to talk about today is sustainability. So and what we mean by sustainability is sustained funding and support for these data resources as infrastructure, as opposed to treating them as grants. So there are 2 components to this. One is the funders, which we've listed as research funding organizations. Primarily that is national funding bodies, science funding bodies. There are also some very significant charities that fund data resources. Welcome Chan Zuckerberg. But it also includes things like big pharma, who are actually funding some data resources. They don't necessarily fund the public ones, although some of them do, but they do fund their own private ones. So that's one component, is the funders of the resources. The other component of this is the biodata resources themselves, the managers and the users. Any solution to the sustainability problem has to be a joint effort between the funders and the managers. It can't be top down from the funders. So we have put together a working group, of funders, representatives from our members, who came up with who developed consultation papers for consulting the wider community of researchers and other funders to solicit ideas on how to address the sustainability challenge. That consultation closed earlier this year. The objectives were to identify best practice, and the papers set out various options for how we might go about solving, or at least addressing, the sustainability issue. We developed 9 principles for cooperative approaches to sustainability. I can't possibly read all of them in the time I'm allotted. But there are a few key ones. They shouldn't require payment. This is for very large resources. And everyone shares responsibility for ensuring the sustainability of the resources. It doesn't mean everyone has to pay for them, but everyone should understand that they have a responsibility to help find ways to solve the sustainability issue. So there are a few draft cooperative mechanisms that are suggested in the document. One is having a common fund for supporting resources. That's the top left. Another one is having sharing, basically sharing staff, that's the one on the top right, among institutions. And a third one is having a distributed model whereby data resources, different parts of data resources are scattered around different countries or different geographies, which allows their funding to be distributed and takes the burden off one single funder to fund one data resource. There are, of course, other options possible, and there's no one solution to the challenge of sustainability. It's likely that any solution will involve some or all of these and probably other solutions. It also requires innovative thinking. So there was a paper published by Terry Johnson and Phil Bourne. Phil Bourne is on our scientific advisory committee and is well known in the life science data community, suggesting new approaches, including some interesting economic approaches to funding resources. So I've reached the end. I realize I've glossed over all the details. This was really more of a 40-minute talk, but we've got everything online. You can view and download there, and with the QR code here. I'll be around. Well, we're almost at the end, but I'll be around for dinner. I'll be around at lunch tomorrow. Do come find me if you want to talk more about this. We're always interested in your ideas, and we're also interested in getting more than just, so the molecular people, I should say, are very familiar with the Global Biodata Coalition. They're also very familiar with the challenges of sustainability, but we're interested also in the biodiversity community and the museum community, because you're all running data resources as well. So I'll stop there and open to questions if we have time.
Thank you very much, Chuck. Unfortunately, no, we're well out of time, but thank you for your great presentation. And as you mentioned, you'll be around for dinner at the beach party. Catch him then and ask him all the pertinent questions. So we have our last speaker for the day, our last speaker for the conference, really. And it's going to be an online presentation for Tani Ranwashi, who is online, but we're just trying to connect with them as well, speaking about curating in context with biodiversity images.
Good day, everyone. My name is Patani Ranwashi from the South African National Biodiversity Institute, and I'll be taking you through our South African experience of curating in context with biodiversity images. This presentation outlines the processes and challenges inherent in managing a collection of biodiversity images, covering topics such as imaging techniques, transcription procedures, infrastructure requirements, quality assurance measures, workflow management, and planning for human resources. Biodiversity information is essential for research, monitoring, and development within the biodiversity sector. Research in understanding species distribution and changes, policy making for informed environmental management, and monitoring ecosystems and species populations. However, there are challenges when trying to access this biodiversity data, as it is inaccessible when needed for critical decisions, and the current existing data lacks comprehensive coverage and quality. Our main objective for the project was to improve access to digitized herbarium collections to support this decision making. In South Africa, biodiversity data is collected opportunistically, and this lacks strategic planning, which leads to limited coverage or representative of the data across the scope of South Africa. There's also a lot of data quality issues, such as misidentification and sampling errors, incomplete locality data, which leads to poor decision making, which could lead to significant biodiversity loss. This was experienced with the shale gas exploration in Karoo in 2016, where the lack of sufficient data to guide environmental assessments. The national government implemented the BioGaps project to address these issues. The BioGaps project aimed at digitizing key biodiversity specimens across South Africa, focusing on 11 taxonomic groups, including plants, mammals, and invertebrates, with the goal of filling data gaps to support environmental assessments and improve species monitoring and inform policy making for infrastructure development. The outcomes were better geographic accuracy and taxonomic coverage, enhanced ability to map species ranges and identify critical habitats. The conventional way of databasing a plant specimen has an average rate of 10 specimens per hour. This process involves collecting the specimens from the cardboard, attaching a barcode, capturing all data on the sheet into a collections database, and returning the specimen to the cardboard. The handling of individual specimens is time-consuming. To meet the goals of the BioGaps project, this traditional method of capturing specimens would not have worked. Following examples from the New York Botanical Garden Herbarium and Florida Museum of Natural History, imaging equipment was purchased and set up in our herbarium. Following some trials and errors, this showed a significant improvement of 1 specimen per minute being imaged. With the capturing of metadata being efficiently integrated into the digital system, this improved the rate of imaging of 25 images in 10 minutes. There were a number of challenges encountered while setting up the digitization project. Technological challenges encountered included delays in procuring the necessary equipment and issues with server reliability and storage capacity. There were also challenges regarding logistical challenges, specimen transportation and setup, particularly for distant herbaria, as the specimen needed to be distributed across the whole scope of South Africa. There were also limited resources for building appropriate imaging workstations. The other challenges were to do with data management and mostly large storage requirements for high-resolution images. We had to rely on external hard drives and cloud storage, and these external hard drives needed to be transported from one distant area to another. To maintain a high quality of the images captured during digitization, an automated image processing was set up. This ensures consistency in image quality in terms of exposure, focus, color accuracy. The format of the images saved is in TIFF, which also preserves the image quality. There were also some quality control checkpoints in terms of lighting, focus, and metadata accuracy. To get the mass digitized specimen images transcribed, we opted for a crowdsourcing solution. We utilized the DigiVol platform to engage volunteers in transcribing specimen labels. The process was for volunteers to transcribe the data, and this data was then validated by our trained staff. Once the data is validated, and the transcribed data is then integrated into the collection database, where the quality control also ensures that there is accuracy of before the data is released back to the public. The BioGaps project was streamlined to reduce handling time and improve efficiency, with clear roles for digitization officers, technicians, and volunteers prescribed. A project officer was handling the coordination amongst the various institutes and stakeholders involved to make sure that all their standards were adhered to. Checkpoints were implemented to ensure the integrity of images and data, and also the project officer was responsible for managing conflicting priorities and limited manpower across institutions. The impact of the Biocaps project could not be understated. The digitization project enhances biodiversity conservation by providing accessible data for decision making, supports South Africa's infrastructure development while minimizing environmental impact, and it also has a few long-term benefits in terms of improved training and awareness in digital curation and biodiversity management, increased access to herbarium collections contributing to global biodiversity knowledge. We have a call to action of continued support and expansion digitization efforts, which are crucial for sustaining biodiversity. Thank you for listening to me, and have a good day.
Thank you, Fatani. I don't know that he's actually online. If you are, you can turn on your microphone and speak to us from afar. But if you have questions in the audience for Fatani about the presentation, you can certainly go onto Oxford Abstracts and send him a message. Ask as many questions as you like, and I'm sure he'll get back to you. But otherwise, we are done for the day. It's party time. It's dancing time, people. I have no idea what's going to happen. I wasn't part of the organising of the party, but I'm sure it is going to be great. So I shall see you all there. Thank you to this amazing team over here who have made sure that everything has run smoothly. Woo! Thank you to Terry for looking after everything over on the side there. Woo! And I hope you've all enjoyed the session, and thank you to all of our marvellous speakers. And that's enough clapping for now. So catch you later.